Hello everyone, I'm Lewis, the CEO and one of the co-founders of ESPROFILER. Today I'm excited to announce a new feature that we've developed, making it super easy for customers to take threat information and use it to inform security strategy and also security spend. This is using threat information at C-level from a strategic perspective. Let's get into it. So most organizations will have multiple threat intelligence feeds, and these feeds are designed to provide operational level intelligence and provide things like IOCs, including IP addresses and hashes that can be used to create rules or detection events. Now, the problem with this type of intelligence is it's designed for operational teams. It's not designed to enable strategic decisions. It's great at keeping the lights on and responding to immediate threats, but it falls short in informing strategic decisions at the executive level. This is where our new feature comes in. Now, a good place to start with this was with the customers that were already trying to take threat information and use it at the strategic level. What we saw was customers tracking large lists of adversaries and tools, along with the associated techniques that those tools or adversaries had previously used. And each time new information became available, they would then update those profiles and reprioritize that adversary or tool. So as a really simple example, let's say a new piece of intelligence came in that an adversary had attacked an organization similar to the customers. This would then be triaged, and likely that adversary would gain a higher priority in that customer's world. And what became then interesting is the techniques that adversary had been associated with. Now, this is very similar to what we see here in MITRE ATT&CK, where we can click on a group and we can see all of the techniques that group's previously used, as well as other information such as other attributed groups and software that they've used. Now, there's a number of problems that we believe exist with this. Firstly, all context of when that attacker used that technique has been lost, and that's super important. There's no differentiation between a technique that was previously used 6 years ago versus something that they're using this week. And from an intelligence perspective, that is incredibly important. Now, the other problem with this is just the way in which intelligence actually occurs. So, in the real world, we likely know about something happening before we understand the attribution to the attacker, or even potentially the tool. This is exactly the same as what we see in the news. Typically, an event will occur, we'll understand what happened, how it happened, before we understand who. This means that focusing on the attacker or the tool is a flawed approach. To address this in ESPROFILER, we've created the concept of sightings, and think of these as observations of threat activity. Out of the box, ESPROFILER will monitor over 300 different news feeds. This includes everything from regional news to government certs, as well as open source intelligence feeds. It then uses artificial intelligence to triage articles coming from those feeds to ensure that they relate to cybersecurity events. Articles that do are then enriched with characteristics so that the sectors, motivations, locations of the attack are all fully understood. We then perform behavioral analysis, enriching those articles with techniques. Finally, any references to attackers or tools is then attributed back to those articles. This feed of articles appears as sightings inside ESPROFILER. And what we do is make it super easy to create a threat profile for your organization. So let's say we're in the finance sector and we do business in the United States, and we're going to use that to build a really simple threat profile. So I'll apply those filters here, and as you can see, that's now enabled us to filter down sightings that relate to those characteristics. Clicking through the interface here, we can see target locations for those sightings, behaviors, which are the techniques, adversary attribution, and tool attribution. And you'll also see that the frequency of adversaries, tools, and behaviors is also displayed. The higher the usage of a specific technique will result in a higher ranking in this view. The key differentiator here is that we can prioritize the sighting itself rather than the adversary or tool. And this is far more powerful. So let me show you this in action. If I click the bulk prioritize button now, what this will do is prioritize the current filtered set data, which obviously relates to financial sector sightings that are relevant to the United States. So clicking that and setting this to a priority 1 will now triage all of those sightings as priority 1. Now the key thing to remember here is that sightings relate to point-in-time events. And just because they set these as priority 1 doesn't mean that in reality they remain priority 1 forever. A really simple analogy of this is imagining your next door neighbour's just been burgled. That information, that intelligence is highly relevant the day you receive it, maybe even the same week, maybe even the same month. But over time, that information becomes far less relevant. The fact that they got burgled 10 years ago probably doesn't even enter your mind. And this is the same principle. So what ESPROFILER will do is dynamically handle all of this for you. It will age out the relevance of old sightings, and we can already see this happening with our dynamic priority here. Many of these sightings are already reaching priority 2 and have dropped in relevance to 66%. This dynamic priority is then applied to adversaries and tools. So what that means is that as new sightings of high relevance come in, the more times they are attributed to adversaries or tools, the more relevant those adversaries or tools become. And equally, as those adversaries and tools are no longer seen, the relevance of them drops over time. So as we see an adversary, for example, being taken down by maybe the FBI, we'll stop seeing activity for that adversary, and the relevance of that adversary will dynamically age out in our system. And that's also the same for techniques, where techniques are constantly reshaping and reprioritizing in ESPROFILER automatically using that dynamic priority. So let me now show you what that looks like in terms of applying that back to a strategy lens. Our first view of this is at a dashboard level, and what you'll see on the left hand side in the chart is something similar to a target on a rifle range. And what this is telling us is that the capability of our investment is well aligned in most areas except for initial access. And what's going on behind the scenes is all of the different techniques are dynamically being prioritized, and then the capability of our tooling is being aligned with that continually. An analogy from history is that once upon a time, it made complete sense to invest in castles. However, in modern times, that would be completely ridiculous. ESPROFILER makes it easy to align strategic intelligence with investment and highlight if the investment is still relevant for the threats that your organization faces. Let's take a look at this in a much lower level of detail. So I'm going to switch over to our threat landscape view. And what this is a view that we put together to fuse the MITRE ATT&CK framework or any behavior-based framework. This includes ICS, mobile, PBOM, anything that articulates threat behavior, and then show two things: the capability of our investment along with the dynamic priority of each technique for our unique threat profile. And the only way we could think of doing this is in a three-dimensional view, where each technique's height represents the capability that we have in our organization, and the width represents the priority of each technique. And what this does is enables us to see immediately where gaps exist, but also the priority of those gaps. So if I apply a basic filter here, you can see the size and scale of MITRE ATT&CK represented with each technique as a row in 3D. If I then apply a filter to look at only techniques above a threat priority of 30%, you can see that this now narrows down to a view that's far more focused and prioritized for the threats that are relevant to my organization. And this is super powerful. This is effectively taking real-time strategic intelligence and applying it to our investment, and then enabling us to not just do a gap analysis, but also an overlap analysis. Clicking on any of these techniques will show us the priority of that technique as well as any of the capabilities of our tooling that are applicable or relevant to that technique. And the really cool thing here is that all of this is modelable. So I can model any scenario that I want. So, for example, if I'm being challenged as a CISO to displace or remove a particular vendor, I could model that scenario and see what that would look like from a threat context such as this, as well as being able to model that from a cost perspective with all of the commercial information that's available in ESPROFILER. Now, you may have noticed that during the initial triage, I performed bulk prioritization using some simple filters. Now, obviously, in production, we may want to do this automatically based upon a much more extensive criteria than just simply sector or country. We may have more complex rules, such as, does this attack involve references to artificial intelligence being used, or whatever is relevant to that organization. So one of the big unique aspects to ESPROFILER is that everything I've just demonstrated is built on top of an API-first platform. And we've taken this a step further with a technology that we call iEngine. And what that means is that we can apply any workflow or automation on top of that API base. And let me demonstrate this right now. So I'm just going to switch over to our iEngine script editor. And what we have here is a script that I've created that takes a sighting, looks at whether or not it has references to GB or US, and then also whether or not it's targeting aerospace or aviation sectors. If it is, it's giving that sighting a priority 1. If it isn't, it's giving it a priority 4. And we're also then adding in a little bit more logic so that if that sighting contains references to AI, artificial intelligence, LLMs, or deepfake, we're also going to tag it with the tag AI. And once that's completed, you can see that we can then self-call the API endpoints available in ESPROFILER to update that sighting. And this is a very simple 27-line script. Now, we'll eventually be turning this into a low-code, no-code solution as well to make this even simpler for users to be able to perform complex strategic intelligence prioritization. So to make this script live, I'm just going to switch over and create a trigger. So you can see I can create a trigger. I can specify that my script should run when a sighting is created or updated. I'll save this trigger and now go back to the sighting interface. And as you can see now, I'm going to create a sighting that matches these conditions. And as soon as I create that sighting, you can see that it's automatically now prioritized that based upon my prioritization rules. So what this means is that it's now possible to automatically process new sightings that we provide with any custom rule set, be it simple prioritization all the way through to complex rule sets that customers might want to implement. Now, the really cool thing here is that we're taking that intelligence from a strategic lens, and ESPROFILER will turn around using its dynamic prioritization and to say, these are the adversaries, these are the tools, and these are the techniques that you should be worried about at any given time. And this is all automated. The prioritization of the techniques, the adversaries and tools will dynamically age out as new information becomes available, meaning that teams do not have to spend time looking at profiles and updating this information continually. And all of this is then contextualized back with the underlying investment and control infrastructure that already exists, helping organizations continually stay aligned with evolving threats that are relevant to them. Thanks for listening, everyone, and please get in touch if you have any more questions or are interested in this capability.